I order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Thursday, October 14th, 2021. Almost said the wrong year, 2021. And the time is 10:18 in the morning. I apologize for our starting a little bit late. The subject of today's hearing is consideration of 7 bills that deal with the closing of a public alley or a portion of a public street or the dedication of land for street purposes or for alley purposes. There's one that's an abandonment of a highway plan. These are all related to streets and alleys, these bills. I will go through the title of each and a brief explanation of each in a moment. We noticed this hearing over a month ago. We did that so that there would be ample time for members of the public who might be concerned to look into these measures and to prepare testimony. We don't have very many witnesses today, but the record will remain open for 2 weeks. The record will close at 5 p.m. on Thursday, October 28th, 2021. So the subject of this morning's hearing is consideration of Bill 24-27, the closing of a public alley in Square 5051, SO 21-00136, Act of 2021. My understanding is that the applicant has asked that we hold off on this one. So I don't believe we will have any testimony on this bill, and we will reschedule or have a hearing at some point on this bill 24-27. As I read these titles, I will say SO and then a number that refers to the surveyor's office. And the surveyor's office has a file number for each of these measures if it involves a land that's been set aside for street or alley purposes. The second bill, I believe the next 2 bills are closely related. Bill 24-104, which is entitled Closing of Public Streets and Alleys and the Removal of Building Restriction Lines Adjacent to Squares 5862, 5865, 5866, and 5867, SO 17-26688, Act of 2021. And Bill 24-105, the dedication of land for public street and alley purposes adjacent to Squares 5862, 5865, 5866, and 5867, SO 17-26689, Act of 2021. The purpose of Bill 24-104 is to close portions of Firth Sterling Avenue Southeast, Eaton Road Southeast, Stevens Road Southeast, Wade Road Southeast, adjacent to Squares 5862, 5865, and 5886. Looking, I didn't see 5886 in the title. To close portions of the public alley system and also to close portions of the public alley system adjacent to these squares in Ward 8 to facilitate the development of Berry Farms. And Bill 24-105, again, Bill 24-105 is to order the dedication and designation of Obama Way Southeast, Eureka Place Southeast, Solomon Road Southeast, Eaton Road Southeast, Riverwalk Southeast, Stevens Road Southeast, and Hermitage Way Southeast, again related to the Berry Farm development. The next bill, the third bill is, because I'm skipping 24-27, is Bill 24-167, entitled The Dedication of Land for Street Purposes and Establishment of a Building Restriction Line in Square 2873, SO 20-04746, Act of 2021. The purpose of this bill is to dedicate lots 1107 and 1113 in Square 2873 to accommodate the extension of W Street Northwest and to establish a 25-foot wide building restriction line at lots 1106 and 1112 in Square 2873. This is in Ward 1. The next bill is Bill 24-211. It has a longer title, closing of a portion of Maryland Avenue Southwest between Independence Avenue and 6th Street Southwest, and the transfer of jurisdiction of the closed portion of Maryland Avenue and portions of Independence Avenue and 4th and 6th Street Southwest. SO 17-26507, Act of 2021. The purpose of this legislation is to close a portion of Maryland Avenue, transfer to the jurisdiction of the closed portion, as well as portions of Independence Avenue, 4th Street, and 6th Street, in Square 492, in Ward 6, to the National Park Service. This relates to the new Eisenhower Memorial. In fact, I believe that the memorial is complete. In fact, I know it is. And that this is just legal house cleaning to ensure that where there were some alterations, that those are recorded properly in the surveyor's office. The next bill is 24-234, entitled The Abandonment of the Highway Plan for Jackson Street Northeast, SO 21-00463, Act of 2021. The purpose of this bill is to remove from the highway plan the extension of Jackson Street Northeast, located in within lot 805 and square 3835 in Ward 5. And the next bill is Bill 24-291, entitled The Omnibus Progressive National Baptist Convention Redevelopment Act of 2021. The purpose of this bill is to remove from the highway plan the extension of a portion of 50th Street Northeast, located within lot 825 and square 5194, to order the closing of 50th Street Northeast and Nanny Helen Burroughs Avenue Northeast adjacent to square 5194, and to accept the dedication of lots 828 and 830 in square 5194 in Ward 7 for public street purposes. I'm sure that didn't make a whole lot of sense, but it will become clearer as we hear testimony with regard to these measures. I should note that when I read something like a closing of a portion of Maryland Avenue or a closing of Nanny Helen Burroughs, we're not actually talking about the entire right-of-way that people are used to driving on, but it may be some portion of the dedicated land that's being adjusted. Either I mentioned it for the Eisenhower Memorial or for some development proposal. We're going to take these measures up by bill. So the first bill, and it's actually two that we will be hearing testimony on, are bills 24-104 and 24-105. Those concern the alterations in the Berry Farms area. I'm going to call the witnesses that we have. Kyrus Freeman, who's an attorney with Holland and Knight. Roger Brown Jr., who is Managing Director of Real Estate Development at Preservation of Affordable Housing, Inc. Tanya Phillips, who's the Community Impact Manager for Preservation of Preservation of Affordable Housing, Inc. And Stephen Liam, who is with Bowman Consulting. And let's see what I got here. Give me a minute while I sort myself out. Not only did I make you wait before I started the hearing, and again, I apologize, but now I've just made you wait since I called on you. Mr. Freeman, you look like you're geared up to go first.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson. I will be brief, as you indicated. This is two bills, one to order the closing of streets and alleys, the second to open a variety of streets and alleys and remove some building restriction lines. We submitted on Friday, October 8th, a full package that describes in detail how we meet the standards for approval. Namely, as you know, that the streets or alleys are not necessary for public street or alley purposes. The package also includes all of the approvals necessary. We have a full and complete file. All agencies and utilities have reviewed and approved it, including Ddot, OP, the ANC, NCPC, etc., DC Water. So again, it's a thorough agency package. There are no outstanding objections. As described in much detail in our submission, the approval of this application would facilitate the implementation of street grid improvements that were included in the Berry Farm Small Area Plan that was adopted by the council. So this is the next step in order to achieve those recommendations. The last thing I would note is that in our package, we asked for 2 amendments to the bills. First, we asked that Section 4 of Bill 24-104 and Section 3 of Bill 24-105. Those have time periods for which we have to complete the work as well as record the plats. We've included track changes, a request for 1-year extensions of those time periods, in large part because of the passage of time since those bills were introduced and delays caused by COVID and other just project timing issues. So that concludes kind of my introduction. I'm happy to answer any questions. Tanya Phillips and Stephen Liam are on. They're available to answer questions if you have any questions. Tanya works with POA and has been kind of point on community engagement with former Berry Farm residents. As you likely know, the site now is vacant. The prior structures have all been demolished, other than a couple structures that are being preserved for historic preservation purposes. And Stephen Liam is with Bowman, who's happy to answer any engineering questions that you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Can you repeat, were you saying that you want portions of the bills deleted?
Amended, Mr. Chairman. In our submission, it's Exhibit A1. We've included track changes that sets forth our proposed changes. Specifically, each bill requires that the work be completed by certain points and the plats recorded by date certain. And what we're essentially asked for is pushing those dates out. Again, it's Section 4 of Bill 24-104 and Section 3 of Bill 24-105. We've asked to push out the plat recordation dates because we anticipate we'll need more time to actually complete the work. Hopefully that will happen once the legislation is approved.
Okay. Yes, I don't have Exhibit A1, so I don't have the track changes. It's possible that staff does. Looking at the bills, 24-104 says the surveyor shall have the authority to record the street and alley closing and building restriction line elimination plats in multiple phases as indicated on the phasing plat in the official file, so long as the Phase 1A plat is recorded by January 31st, 2022, the Phase 1B plat recorded by January 31st, 2023, and the Phase 2A and 2B plats are recorded by January 31st, 2025.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I misspoke. I'm sorry, it's Exhibit A2. But if you look at the sections that you just read, what we would request is that in Section 1, if you will, the Phase 1A plat is recorded by January 31st, 2023. Obviously, January 31st, 22 is right around the corner. So I don't think we'll be able to, we want to just have sufficient time to.
Yeah, I see. And I have Exhibit A2. So you're just pushing them out by a year.
Yes, sir.
in both bills. But let me ask you this, and I'll ask the surveyor when I get to him. Is there a reason why the plats can't just all be recorded now?
Well,
Vacant, so it isn't necessary, the streets that are being closed, it's not necessary that they still be official. And the streets that you're dedicating, again, the land is all vacant, so it's not necessary that we wait to dedicate them.
on the closings, just using a first date, for example, January 2022, we wanted to add an additional amount of time because clearly we're having a hearing today, but we got to get through first reading, second reading, signature by the mayor, congressional review. So we weren't confident that the law would be effective by January 2022, just given the additional legislative process required. As it relates to the streets, what we're wanting to do is close them in phases and construct them in phases. So when you look at the bill, it talks about essentially 3 phases. So you're correct, the site has been vacated, but we're going to build the streets in phases, and you can't record the dedication plats because there are some new street connections. You can't record those new street dedication plats until those streets have actually been constructed and accepted by Ddot. So there is, at least on the dedication plats, we can't record those immediately because we actually had to complete the work before we record those.
You know, I love this stuff because I don't see that necessarily follows. We have plenty of dedicated streets in the city that have never been built. I think the issue here for you is that Ddot needs to accept the streets when they're actually built. And that could be handled through an agreement between the developer and Ddot.
You're right, Mr. Chairman. Two points. There are a number of streets that we actually have to build to improve the street grid. So there are some new streets that are being developed here. Secondly, you are absolutely correct. We do have an agreement in place as it relates to the construction of those streets in terms of inspections, timings, etc. So we will build the streets in close coordination with Ddot, and they had to approve it and approve those streets before we can record the dedications. So what we're
No, but that's the part is that what they put in the agreement?
Yes, they have to be accepted to Ddot before we can record the dedication plans.
Okay, but it doesn't have to be that way. You're fine with, I'm going to put this a little colloquially, you're fine with running your bulldozers all over the site, whether the streets are open or closed. It's just that when the project's done, you need to have certain streets closed and other streets, actually you need to have all the streets closed now in order to get your record lots, right?
So some of the first building, if you will, we're utilizing existing street conditions. So what we call building 1B, that's an all affordable senior housing building. That already fronts on a street, and therefore it's not dependent on the street dedications. And again, part of it's when you get to the next square that you'd actually have to physically close some alleys and streets in order to get those record lots. But as it relates to the first building, we're able to move forward with that without the any new streets being dedicated, because it already fronts on an existing street.
Let me ask you this. Are there any conditions that are in the record other than Ddot?
Most of the conditions are standard. DC Water, for example, we had to agree to grant an easement. Verizon required us to agree to relocate their facilities. Much of that work has already been done in terms of removal of facilities, payment of fees. So there are no outstanding conditions. And again, a lot of those things have already been established or done because we had to do it in order to raise the former structures.
And I didn't ask my question properly. Are there any objections in the record?
No objections. All objections have been removed. So for example, DC Water, their normal practice is to say, we object unless you agree to grant an easement.
Yeah, no, I understand. I cut you short. That might be valuable for you to finish that just for the public.
Yeah, so most utilities or agencies typically say, we object unless you agree to do X or Y. So DC Water, for example, would say, we object unless you agree to grant an easement. We respond and say, yes, we agree to grant an easement, or we agree to pay additional fees. And then the agency or utility will submit a letter that says, based on your agreement, we have withdrawn our objection. So in our package, what we've indicated is that to the extent that there were any objections, all of those objections have been withdrawn.
Can you guarantee that the dates that you propose, that the construction will meet those dates? And I use the word guarantee purposefully. I don't mean putting you on the spot. We have a lot of legislation that comes through with regard to disposition of land and development, other legislation related to development. And it's not unusual for us to be asked to extend the deadlines after we've approved something. You might be able to tell from my line of questioning that I am not enthusiastic about phasing. I just assume that if we're going to dedicate those streets, we dedicate them. And if we're going to close streets, we close them and not deal with deadlines. So it's kind of from that perspective that I'm asking the question whether you can guarantee that the development will meet those deadlines.
I will use the word yes, guarantee. We spend a lot of time before I submitted those track changes just to make sure we felt strongly that we could meet those dates. So on behalf of POA, I can guarantee that we feel very confident that we will be able to meet those dates that are established in the bill. Our proposed dates that we've requested in the bill.
Yes. Okay, give me just a second.
I also didn't get Ddot's testimony.
I don't think I have any other questions for you, but you will stick around, please, during this hearing. The surveyor comes at the end, so I hate to make you sit through a bunch of other street and alleys, but the surveyor may say something that I might want to come back to you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Phillips, will you forgive me if I didn't have any questions for you?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Will you forgive me if I didn't have any questions for you?
I forgive you.
Although I could ask if there's anything you want to add to what Freeman said.
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Liam, same thing. Forgive me. Okay, if you all would stick around, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the next bill. And the next bill is 24-167, which is dedication of land for street purposes and establishment of a building restriction line in square 2873, which, if I remember correctly, is in Ward 1. We have one witness, Derek Neese Williams.
Hello and good morning. Are you hearing me all right?
Morning. I can hear you now. I don't have a copy of your statement. Do you have a written statement?
I do not. I think I'll keep it fairly brief today, as it's fairly straightforward. But I
Okay.
can follow up with a written version if you would like.
I would like that, please.
No problem at all. I'll make sure to send that right along at the conclusion of the proceedings today.
Okay.
All right.
So
Well,
please proceed.
thank you all for your time today, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. My name is Derek Neese-Williams. I currently serve as the Executive Director for Campus Planning, Architecture, and Development at my beloved alma mater, Howard University. I'm here to speak about Bill number 24-167 with respect to the dedication of W Street between 8th and 9th Streets Northwest. So to go back in time, just briefly, back to 2004, this was initially contemplated as part of the Duke Plan, which is a small area plan component of the comprehensive plan, to foster east-west connections across Georgia Avenue and Florida Avenue in this particular section of the Mid-City area, specifically to foster better connections to the campus across W and Bryant Streets specifically, and also with a correlated component to make smaller public spaces that were scaled to the city and distinct from larger campus quadrangles. And as a corollary to that, obviously to spur economic development and animation in this area of the city. Fast forwarding to the 2011 Central Campus Master Plan for the university, this theme of east-west connections also came up. The theme of pedestrian connectivity also came up, as well as the connection of the street grid between Florida Avenue and Georgia to foster better connectivity to the campus at large. And so in 2017, the subject properties were actually extracted from the boundaries of our Central Campus Master Plan in order to facilitate commercial development. However, we still remain stalwart in our commitment to connect the grid in these areas. And so since that time, we've worked in earnest with Ddot, DOEE, the Office of the Surveyor, and many other city entities to arrive at a compliant and appropriate solution for the connection of W Street between 9th and 8th Streets Northwest, which includes a 55-foot cartway that will be publicly dedicated. In addition, there will be a 25-foot building restriction line to the north, which will create the smaller public spaces that were referenced in the Duke Plan. This will overall connect the street grid, break up what is considered a super block in this area of the district, yield a better pedestrian environment with more connectivity, increased opportunities for street frontage, animation, activation, density, height, and economic development. So with that, I'll conclude my statements and see if there are any questions.
Help me a little bit here. What are the east-west streets north and south of this proposed, I think you said proposed W Street?
Correct. So as it stands, there are plans in the works to connect W Street and Bryant Street across between Georgia Avenue and Florida Avenue / Sherman Avenue on the west and Georgia Avenue on the east. The university does not control all of the parcels there, but to date, the parcels along Sherman Avenue, specifically the development, which includes the Whole Foods, has been developed, and the Bryant Street connection there between 9th Street and Florida Avenue has been created, as well as the connection between along W Street between 9th Street and Florida Avenue by others. We are simply moving forward with a phased implementation approach to achieve the full connectivity, this being the first, which will be a publicly dedicated street, and the balance will be 3 privately dedicated segments. One, which will be W Street, will continue from 8th Street to Georgia Avenue, and then Bryant Street will actually extend from 9th Street all the way to Georgia Avenue, creating that full connectivity between Florida and Georgia Avenue. Did I answer your question, Chairman?
No, so to the south, parallel to the dedicated street is what, W or?
V Street.
V.
V Street, correct.
So right now, if I'm going up or down 9th Street, I would go from V to,
Berry Place.
and that's why you refer to it as a super block,
Correct.
V to Berry. And
Yes,
then create a new, you're calling it W Street.
that's correct.
I think the surveyor's plat suggests it would be called Howard Street.
Interesting.
If I remember, I'll ask the surveyor. If he's watching, maybe he could speak to that. It says land dedication for public street, Howard Street Northwest.
Interesting. Our intention was to extend the trajectory of W Street across. The naming, that ultimately is the jurisdiction of the city. Our assumption was that you would want to call that W Street to be consistent with the remaining components of the grid.
We'll see if I remember to ask the surveyor about this. So the square, which is square 2875, is right now under the control of Howard University.
For the most part, correct. And all of the subject properties that will be dedicated, which will be 1107 and 1113, will be correct. They are under control of the university and owned by the university.
You know, I don't see 1107. I see 1108 and I see 1106.
And my apologies, there were a number of different subdivisions and re-subdivisions that we worked on with the Office of the Surveyor. So I may have some of those lot numbers wrong. But the two that are referenced in the language are the two that are being dedicated publicly.
Okay.
So that would be, excuse me while I scroll through this here. Yep, it states 1107 and 1113 in the agenda today.
Are the two that are being dedicated?
Correct.
Yeah, that would make sense. So Howard, what Howard gets out of this is better connectivity and better planning.
And we make good on a commitment that was made all the way dating back to the 2011 master plan, which did survive the extraction of these parcels from the boundaries of our plan, which is memorialized in zoning order 1115F, as in Frank.
Okay. Now, is Howard proposing to construct this street?
Our partners, our development partners to the south, will be constructing this segment of the roadway. And they've been collaborating with the Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, as well as DC Water and others. So we do have a tri-party agreement that has been executed by the development partner, the university, and the Department of Transportation.
So do you know when that will be done? So this is in connection with the development.
Correct.
When that will be done?
My understanding is that that will be the last component of the development. They are in the process now of finalizing their permits and starting the construction. They're in the foundation to grade stage right now. So I would say within the next 12 to 14 months, more likely than not. And the understanding is that the street will be constructed as sort of the last component of the development to make sure that it's not impacted negatively by any of the construction, traffic, or activities. It's in a pristine condition.
Yeah. Let me see if I have any other questions. Hold on. So I'm either mentally ill and I'm staring off at the ceiling and just moving my lips and talking to myself, or there's actually somebody on the other side of the room and I'm asking them questions. We're gonna go for the latter. I don't think I have any other questions at this point. I will be at the end of the hearing testimony from the surveyor. I don't think I'll have any questions for you, but it would be helpful if you could stick around.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman.
And then we may have some questions following the hearing, but if so, Blaine Stone on my staff will reach out. Have you connected with him already?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you for your time.
We will turn to the next street, which is, or next bill, which is 24-211. And we actually don't have witnesses on for this one, other than the surveyor at the end. This is the closing of a portion of Maryland Avenue and Independence Avenue and 4th and 6th Street, and it relates to the Eisenhower Memorial, which has already been built. The National Park Service was intimately involved with that. So we will get testimony on that when we get to the surveyor. So we will turn to Bill 24-234. And that is the abandonment of the highway plan for Jackson Street Northeast. This is in Ward 5. We have Christine Scheicher from Holland and Knight and Daniel Gordon with the Hanover Company. Before you speak, let me just get my papers in order here. Hold on. The non-existent person on the other end of the room that I made up just said that you probably have a PowerPoint and you should have the technical ability to share it. So when you're ready, and good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson. I'm Christine Scheicher with the law firm of Holland and Knight, representing the applicant in this case. Can you see my PowerPoint screen?
I can see, yes, I see something.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It should say the bill number on it.
Yep.
All right, thank you. I am here today representing the applicant who has requested to remove a 1-block portion of Jackson Street from the highway plan. Dan Gordon, representing the applicant, has joined us and he will be available for questions after our brief presentation. On Friday, October 8th, we filed a pre-hearing submission that included the agency responses as well as a detailed statement and how we satisfied the statutory requirement for removal of a portion of Jackson Street from the highway plan. The property is located in Ward 5 along the east side of 8th Street Northeast. This Jackson Street is here, and the application is seeking to remove a portion of Jackson Street from the highway plan that bisects the site, which is a single tax lot. It's lot 805. This should be permitted because the extension of Jackson Street is not necessary for highway purposes. This site is being developed as a residential project that was approved as a planned unit development by the Zoning Commission in case number 18-21. The project includes approximately 377 residential units, as well as affordable housing units at a variety of affordability levels. The Zoning Commission found that the PUD was not inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and was designed within the framework of the Brooklyn CUA small area plan within which it's located. This is a blow up of the 1968 highway plan, and you can see here is the small portion of Jackson Street which we propose to remove from the highway plan. The application was evaluated by all of the applicable agencies. NCPC concluded that there was no federal interest such that no review was necessary following a community comment period in which no comments were submitted. Secondly, Ddot had no objection to the removal of this portion of Jackson Street from the highway plan because this planned roadway would never likely connect across the tracks over to the east side of the tracks, and therefore consistent with their support for the planned unit development, they had no objection. And ANC 5E, which is the ANC within which this project is located, unanimously voted to support this removal, and that's consistent with their past position of support for the PUD. The DC code does provide that an applicant has the free right to use and enjoy its property, even if it's encumbered by the highway plan. However, you are not permitted to get a record lot, and so you're only allowed to have a tax lot. So this application has been submitted so that we can convert lot 805 to a record lot, which would be recorded in the surveyor's office. Just as a brief update, here is 8th Street on the top, north is to the side. Here is the proposed or the project that's been approved. It has a north and a south tower with a visual extension of Jackson Street. This is looking north along 8th Street at the south tower, excuse me, the north tower. This is looking towards the south side of the project. And this is the visual extension of Jackson Street with the tracks in the back. The building is well under construction. It started in 2020, and these are progress photos from late summer. Delivery is expected. Delivery of the first units are expected in the first quarter of 2022. And here is looking towards the south building. And with that, that concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
In the materials that you submitted, this is an entirely residential project,
That's correct.
and I'm looking at your statement, 377 units.
That is correct.
But you, in your statement, you don't say how many of the units are affordable and at what level.
There are 46 affordable housing units in the project, representing about 12% of the project. They are offered at various ranges of 50% MFI, 60% MFI, and 80% MFI.
Does the PUD order give a more specific breakdown?
The PUD order offer or required a certain amount of square footage, which we have complied with or exceeded. It was at 12%. And the DHCD has already approved our allocation of units. I can say that 9 are offered at 50% MFI, 31 are offered at 60%, and 6 are offered at 80%. And that is consistent with what was approved by the PUD and has been approved by DHCD.
But what the PUD required was 12% of the square footage.
Correct. And that is what equates to 12% of that square footage is those 46 affordable housing units.
So it could be, and I'm not trying to press you here, it could be 100 micro units or it could be 1 super unit.
No, the zoning commission required at least 2 B3 bedrooms, and then they needed to be proportional with the studios and the 1 bedrooms and the 2 and 3 bedroom proportionality. So that was all dictated by the PUD and then reviewed by DHCD. Affordable units are required to be proportional to the market rate units.
Say that a little differently, proportional to the market rate units. So like,
So if 50% of your units are studios and 50% are 1 bedroom, your IZ units have to be 50% studios and 50% 1 bedrooms. You couldn't, for example, put all of your IZ units as studios. You have to reflect what the makeup of the market rate units are.
okay. Can I ask what percentage of the market units are these? So the 9 and 50% wouldn't necessarily be 12% of the. No, I'm confusing. The 9 and 50% is not it's the unit size. It's
Correct.
When do you expect that the project will be completed?
The project is fully under construction, and the first units are expected to deliver in the first quarter of 2022.
And if I may ask, given where we've been with the pandemic and do people want to live in a city and all that kind of stuff, Is the developer feeling confident about getting the units? I guess it's rental, right? Getting the units leased?
I would ask Mr. Gordon if he could respond to that on behalf of the developer.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that, technical difficulties. Our project is delivering in this Brookland Edgewood submarket a few months behind several other projects that are currently in the process of leasing up. And at this point, there is actually a lot of leasing velocity at those projects, Trammell Crow project and an MRP project. And so we're feeling quite confident about our ability to lease units in both Brookland, Edgewood, all across the submarket. We're excited.
Give me a second to see if I have any other questions on that. Does the closing of the right-of-way, does that in any way affect the FAR calculation?
Chairman, no, because we are not actually closing a right-of-way. We are simply removing a planned street from the highway plan. So therefore, it is private property and it is allowed to be developed and used. The only limitation you have when you have a highway planned street is that you can't get a record lot. So technically, we would not need to go through this process. We were able to use an A&T lot in order to, for all zoning purposes. However, because we wanted to have a record lot recorded in the surveyor's office, since Jackson Street is never going to be a condemned street or a dedicated street, we thought we'd go through this process to remove it from the highway plan.
Yeah, thank you, because I'd forgotten this is what I call a paper street. And
it's even less than a paper street because it's not even a street. In order for it to become a street, it would either have to be dedicated or condemned.
yes. Okay, I don't have any other questions for you at this point. And I probably won't later, but it still would be helpful if you stuck around just in case.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
And I appreciate the materials that you gave us, which I now have made a mess of, but it's helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to turn to the next bill, and that is Bill 24-291, which is to remove from the highway plan the extension of a portion of 50th Street Northeast, and to order the closing of 50th Street and Northeast and Nanny Helen Burroughs Avenue, adjacent to Square 5194, and to accept dedication of some land for public street purposes. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
I am fine. How are you?
Good, thanks. And I just want to note that James Gopinski from AMT, he should be allowed to serve as a panelist also.
Yeah, and the record, I mean, the witness list also lists Ray Nix.
Yeah, Ray is in the here with me, so.
Okay.
And then Blaine, I'm going to ask your assistance with pulling up slide number 7 at some point for James' testimony. For the record, my name is Lila Batiste, and my colleague Chris Cohen and I are here on behalf of the applicant, APC Urban, and the property owner, which is Providence Place Progressive National Baptist Convention, sorry. We're joined by Ray Nix, who's the developer's representative, which is a joint venture between APC, Atlantic Pacific Communities, and Urban Matters. We're also joined by the civil engineers for this project, AMT, which is represented by James Gopinski, and Dan Schreiber is also in the office with me. Just by way of background, the site is located on the east side of 50th Street Northeast, between Annie Helen Burroughs and Fitch Place. The application before you relates to the redevelopment of Lot 827, which is a 1.6 acre site approved for planned unit development pursuant to Zoning Commission Order 1708. Adjacent to the PUD site to the east is the Progressive National Baptist Convention campus. And actually PNBC owns both lot 829, where their site is located, and the PUD site. The approved PUD consists of 93 apartment units, all of which will be used to support families at 60% median family income. Of the 93 units, 35 will be replacement units for Lincoln Heights and the Richardson dwelling communities as part of the DEMPED's New Communities Initiative. The application, really the dedication of the land for 50th Street right-of-way, as well as the closure, really serves the purpose of reconciling how the 50th Street functions versus what's recorded in the land records. And what I mean by that, the portion of the land that's being dedicated is it's private land owned by PNBC, but there is an encroachment of both the 50th Street roadway and public infrastructure, including sidewalks, manholes, light poles. All of that is already encroaching onto the private property. The area of land to be closed, the portion of 50th Street to be closed, actually is situated and functions like it's on PNBC's private property. And so the application really kind of reconciles how 50th Street functions on this segment of the roadway versus what the ownership information in the land records. Not the approval of the application won't impact the current configuration or operation of 50th Street. Similarly, the portion of the highway plan to be removed will not impact transportation or planning operations in this area of the city. And with that, I'm going to just ask Blaine, if you can pull up slide 7 in the PowerPoint that was sent. I'm going to turn it over to James Kapinski just to show through an exhibit the areas to be dedicated and closed. And while that's being pulled up, I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, the closure, the removal of the highway plan, and the dedication are all being proposed in connection with the public access easement that will be granted over a sidewalk that connects from the PUD site north to Nanny Helen Burroughs. That sidewalk will be constructed on private property, but there will be a public access easement over that sidewalk in order to facilitate pedestrian connectivity from the PUD site to Nanny Helen Burroughs. And so with that, I don't know, can Blaine hear me?
There is not a James who's in the audience.
Oh, James Kapinski is not. Okay, well, Blaine, if you pull up slide 7, I can speak to it.
And if there is somebody in the audience who is James Kapinski and identified some other way, if you could somehow identify yourself or contact Matisse or Mr. Stum to say, hey, so-and-so is me.
That's okay, Mr. Chairman, I can speak to the exhibit on the screen.
Okay, I have to say, I don't understand any of this.
That's okay.
Let me ask a couple of basic questions.
Mm-hmm.
The legislation refers to closing a portion of Nanny Helen Burroughs Avenue.
No.
Is some part of it being closed?
No, it proposes a closure, a portion of 50th Street Northeast, and that is reflected. I see James on the line now. That is reflected on the kind of very lower right.
Lower right, lower left.
of the- Well, I don't know how you're seeing it. So you see the area in blue. It says public right of way to be closed. That's approximately 377 square feet of land. That will be closed and vested back to PNBC, vested to PNBC, which is the owner. of the
Yes, I see that.
The area to be dedicated is, right, you're moving right there. It's about 1,400 square feet of land. That's actually privately owned land, but you'll see that 50th Street is encroaches onto that land, as well as there's a sidewalk just above where the cursor, that's street, and then there's sidewalk inside that triangular portion to the left. There you go. Oh, the other way, where there are manholes, light poles, and what have you. So that's public, that functions as public sidewalk, although it's on private land. And so all of that area outlined in pink will be dedicated to the district. And then the area hatched in red is private property. There will be a sidewalk that's either under construction or already constructed, but there will be a public access easement over that sidewalk in order to allow for connectivity from the PUD site where it says proposed building to the right on my screen, Blaine. Where it says proposed building.
I don't see where it says, oh yeah, it's in big letters, okay.
Yeah, so the sidewalk will connect that building north to Nanny Helen Burroughs Avenue.
So is it fair to say that what's going on here is a sort of a squaring off of 50th Street?
That's correct.
And that the hearing notice, which said closing a portion of Nanny Helen Burroughs, was actually inaccurate?
Yeah, that is incorrect. It would be
And,
a removal of a portion of the highway plan, but not closing any portion of Nanny Helen Burroughs.
oh, so there is a removal of a portion of NHB from the highway plan.
That might be correct, yes.
Okay. Just a moment. I'm told that Mr. Kapinski is on. Oh, I
I
see.
am. Thank you, Chairman Mendelson.
Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think what was described thus far is exactly what's going on. I have nothing else to add to that.
I think I heard you say, Ms. Batiste, that the this project went through the zoning approval as a PUD?
Correct. In 2017 or 16. The order went to the zoning commission in 2016. The order is number 1708.
Okay, and the project is under construction now.
Correct.
When do you expect it will be delivered?
The project should be completed by the first quarter of 2022.
By the first quarter means January 1st.
Well, within the first quarter of 2022, sorry.
Now, for a hot second, Councilmember Gray had noticed an emergency bill to approve this. It wouldn't have been effective because the surveyor doesn't record based on an emergency. But that makes me want to ask how much urgency there is here.
Well, the time sensitivity and the urgency is that the project is under construction. And we need to record, we need the record lots recorded in order to obtain a CFO. So what we're trying to avoid is a situation where the project is completed, but we're not able to obtain a certificate of occupancy. And given that all of the units will be affordable and a third will serve residents of Richardson, Lincoln Heights and Richardson dwellings, we wanted to make sure that there was no significant delay due to the congressional layover.
The project is 93 units total,
Yes,
and all of the units will be 60% or below median family income.
yes,
And the project will be completed. That means you'll need your C of O the first quarter of next year.
correct.
So as long as we act, typically what we do if there's a rush is at the point that the committee marks up and we have first or second reading, I would say second, that we would at that point do a emergency. What the surveyor sees is a permanent bill has been adopted by the council, and that gives the surveyor comfort to record the plat. So what I'm taking from this is that we have a couple months for the council to get this taken care of. Is there, I don't recall, did you speak to community support or opposition?
So the ANC 7C voted in support of the project. And we had extensive outreach with the ANC, Deanwood Citizens Association, and the New Communities Initiative.
Yeah. Are you aware of any community opposition?
No. And we had overwhelming support for the PUD, which the sidewalk was approved or proposed as a condition of the PUD approval. So
are there any objections to the record?
there are no objections in the record. All of the objections have been addressed. The Ddot has two conditions, one being the recordation of a public access easement, which we have finalized and we're in the process of collecting signatures. We should have those probably by tomorrow, all of them, if not later today. And then we accept the condition that relates to the certification of the public space improvements.
Say that last part. You accept.
The certification or acceptance of the public space improvements by Ddot, that was their second condition.
Okay. How will that be accomplished? Ddot will have to sign off on something, or?
Yes, and yes, they'll have to sign off on any improvements made in the public space. In this case, the sidewalk where the public access easement is being created is in private space. So I don't anticipate any delays from that condition.
Well, will you let us know on both of those objections by Ddot when they're completed?
Yes.
If they're not completed, then we have to put that in the legislative language. And if they are completed, then that makes the legislation easier. So that's why I asked. Let me check for a second. Hold on. I don't believe I have any other questions. If you would stick around just in case something comes up when the surveyor testifies.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, can I just get clarification on the timing? So are you, as it relates to the permanent legislation versus the emergency, we'll go through the legislative process. Are you saying that you would not accept emergency legislation for this because the surveyor can record during the congressional overlay period?
No, yes and no. No and yes. The, Mr. Gray had noticed an emergency 2 weeks ago.
Mhm,
That did strike me as premature. We hadn't had a hearing.
mhm.
And at that point, we weren't close to markup.
Yeah.
At this point, we've had a hearing. Part of the hearing is an opportunity for the public to come in and object and tell us why this shouldn't happen. I haven't heard from the surveyor yet, but I'm not hearing any opposition in testimony today. At this point, it's a function of when staff Mr. Stum can get to finalizing the report. I don't want to put it all on him, but there are a lot of things that are at the council. Let's just say that we would be able to mark this up in the committee of the whole in mid-November or the first Tuesday of December. We would then have first and second reading, either the first Tuesday in December. Well, have it in December, first reading in December and second reading no later than the first Tuesday in January. At that point, we could do an emergency bill.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's not that we can't do an emergency, but the committee frowns heavily, mightily, on doing emergency before there's even been a markup.
Understand. Thank you.
And the committee is able to do a markup simultaneously with first reading. So, I think that would help you in terms of then being able to get your certificate of occupancy in during the first quarter.
Thank you.
Now, all that said, assuming that the conditions are all worked out, and it sounds to me like everything's close to being ready.
Yes.
I do not have any other questions, but stick around just in case.
Okay.
Thank you, both of you, very much. So we'll turn now to the surveyor, Mr. Joseph Snyder, and also a representative from Ddot. I have on the list Anna Chamberlain, although I'm told it might be somebody else. Before you start, Mr. Snyder, give me just a sorry about that. Thank you. Why don't you begin? You'll go first, Mr. Snyder, and then Mr. Emerine. You're on,
Sure.
Snyder.
Yep.
And I
Okay.
like your background.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, members, and staff of the Committee of the Whole. I'm Joseph Snyder, the surveyor of the District of Columbia at the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs. I appear before you today to provide background information on B 24104, closing of public streets and alleys and the removal of building restriction lines adjacent to squares 5862, 5865, 5866, and 5867. SO 17 26688, Act of 2021. B 24105, dedication of land for street and alley purposes adjacent to the aforementioned squares. SO number 17 26689, Act of 2021. 20B 24-167, dedication of land for street purposes and establishment of building restriction line in square 2873. SO 20-04746, Act of 2021. B 24-211, closing of a portion of Maryland Avenue Southwest between Independence Avenue and 6th Street Southwest, and the transfer of jurisdiction of the closed portion of Maryland Avenue and portions of Independence Avenue and 4th and 6th Street Southwest. SO 17-26507, Act of 2021. Bill 24-234, abandonment of the highway plan for Jackson Street Northeast. SO 2021-00463, Act of 2021. And B 24-291, Omnibus Progressive National Baptist Convention Redevelopment Act of 2021. Mr. Chairman, for the sake of brevity, I may skip over like rereading some of the stuff that's in the elongated official testimony as far as like restating about the closings and openings. I'll try to only say that once. If there's anything that I'm testifying on where it's elongated in the testimony that you want me to circle back on, I'm happy to do so with your permission. I'll begin with 24-104, closing of public streets and alleys and removal of building restriction lines adjacent to squares 5862, 5865, 5866, and 5867. SO 17-2688, Act of 2021, which was introduced by Councilmember White. The purpose of this bill is to close portions of First Sterling Avenue Southeast, Eaton Road Southeast, Stevens Road Southeast, adjacent to squares 5862, 5865, and this is a typographical error. It should say 5866 and not 5886. That will be amended and sent to your office. And removal of building restriction lines and to close portions of the public alley system in squares 5862, 5865, 5866, and 58. That should also be 5867, not 5887. And removal of building restriction lines in Ward 8 to facilitate the redevelopment at the Berry Farms site. The portions of First Sterling Avenue Southeast, Eaton Road Southeast, Stephen Road Southeast, and alleys to be closed in the aforementioned squares were created by subdivisions as shown in the levy book, Levy Court 2 on page 1, book 57 on page 15, book 67 on pages 40 and 40A, and book 117 on page 32, respectively, recorded from the years 1867 to 1942. Title to the closed portions of First Sterling Avenue, Eaton Road, and Stevens Road Southeast, and alleys in the aforementioned squares could not be determined to be held by the District of Columbia or the United States. The most probable estimate of value as of January 1, 2021, which represents tax year 2022 for the public streets, public alleys, and building restriction lines removed in the aforementioned squares, is $4,149,800. The applicant for this closing is the Berry Farms Redevelopment Associates and the District of Columbia, who are represented by Holland and Knight LLC. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies and utility companies of the application on August 23rd, 2018. In a letter dated August 8, 2021, the District Department of Transportation objected to this application. However, Ddot would have no objection to this application if all terms and conditions contained in the agreement are satisfied as outlined in their letter dated August 8, 2019. In a letter dated August 24th, 2018, DC Water objected to this application, indicating it currently operates or maintains facilities located within the proposed street and alley closing area. However, DC Water would have no objection if the applicant executed and recorded an easement, which allows for the continued operation and maintenance of their facilities. DC Water subsequently submitted a letter dated July 23rd, 2019, stating I lost my place, stating it no longer objected to the proposed closure because their objections had been resolved. The remaining executive branch agencies have no objections. The surveyor's office notified utility companies of the application on August 24, 2018. In a letter dated September 18, 2018, Pepco objected to this application. However, Pepco would not have any objection to the proposed closing of public streets and alleys if Pepco's electrical facilities were maintained in place or relocated at no cost to Pepco. Pepco subsequently submitted a letter dated April 3rd, 2019, stating it no longer objected to the proposed closure due to the applicant's proposal to enter into an easement agreement with Pepco. The remaining utility companies have no objection. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.023, the surveyor's office notified the National Capital Planning Commission of this application on August 24, 2018. In a letter dated September 24, 2018, NCPC staff has determined the proposed project falls under an exception listed in Chapter 8 of NCPC submission guidelines. Specifically, NCPC concluded that the project meets the conditions of Exception 9 regarding the amendment to the highway plan, which encompass public street and alley dedications or closures outside the LaFonte's plan of the federal city. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.025, Advisory Neighborhood Commission ANC 8C was notified of this application on August 24, 2018. In a letter dated April 26, 2019, ANC 8C indicated their support for the proposed closing. Now for 24-105, closely related to 104. The dedication of land for public street and alley purposes adjacent to squares 5862, 5865, and 5867, SO 17-26689, Act of 2021, which was introduced by Councilmember White. This bill would order the dedication and designation of Obama Way Southeast, Eureka Place Southeast, Solomon Road Southeast, Eaton Road Southeast, River Walk Southeast, Stevens Road Southeast, and Hermitage Way Southeast, adjacent to the aforementioned squares for public street purposes. To dedicate land to widen portions of Summer Road Southeast, Eaton Road Southeast, and Stevens Road Southeast, adjacent to the same squares, and to dedicate land adjacent to the aforementioned squares for public alley purposes, and authorize the improvement of the dedicated land for street and alley purposes in Ward 8. The applicant for this application is the Berry Farms Redevelopment Associates, LLC, in the District of Columbia, who are represented by Holland and Knight, LLC. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies and utility companies of this application on August 24th, 2018. In a letter dated August 8th, 2019, Ddot objected to this application. However, Ddot would have no objection to the application if all terms and conditions contained in the agreement are satisfied as outlined in their letter dated August 8, 2019. The remaining agencies have no objections. Surveyor's office notified the utility companies of the application on August 24, 2018. In a letter April 12, 2019, Washington Gas objected to the dedication of the land for public street and public alleys due to the existence of active natural gas facilities within the limits of the proposed alley closure. However, in a letter dated August 13, 2020, Washington Gas clarified that it does not have active gas facilities within the limits of the proposal, in that it has no objections. The remaining utility companies have no objections. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.023, the Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission, NCPC, of this application on August 24, 2018. In a letter dated September 24, 2018, NCPC staff determined that the proposal project falls under an exception listed in Chapter 8. Noted that it's the exact same exception as noted in 24-104. That is outside the LaFont plan for the federal city. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.025, Advisory Neighborhood Commission ANC 8C was notified of this application on August 24, 2018 in a letter dated April 26, 2019. ANC 8C indicated their support for this application.
Before you go to the next bill, I think I want to spend a little bit of time on this one. I think this one and the last one I have some questions about. So let me spend some time on this. So the only issue at this point, the only objection that is outstanding is Ddot.
To my knowledge, that is correct.
Now, I seem to have a bunch of different pages of plats. Are all of them? Well, do you see any reason why the council can't combine for legislative purposes these two measures so that we do the closing and the dedication in the same bill?
I don't, the only thing that's unclear to me. So initially I'd sent over two plats that we'll call them the overarching exhibits. One's an exhibit for the closing and the other one's an exhibit for the dedications as a whole, like as if it wasn't being phased. We couldn't do both of those on one plat. It would just been lines going everywhere. So we had to kind of break that out, but that's initially how we had done the plats. And then we were requested to break out those plats into the phasing that we see on the subsequent broken out plats. But unless there's something between Ddot and the applicant where there's an issue with doing the recordings at one time, as those two plats, I could even do the dedication and closing plats under one book and page as a 2-page plat. It's not a problem to do it that way for my office. I don't know if that creates other problems with, Ddot and the applicant. So that's the only outstanding question I would have.
Sure, and I'm going to ask some questions of Ddot. But your answer does lead to this question, and that is phasing. So what the applicant testified at the beginning of this hearing was that they're planning on doing these dedications and closings in phases, which strikes me as problematic for you. I suppose we could in the legislation say, because you have different plats, I see, like you have phase 1A, phase 1B. So we could in the legislation in one section approve phase 1A, and then in another section of the bill approve phase 1B, and then I guess you could phase your recording. Isn't it easier though for you just to record it all at once? So long as Ddot can get over its objection?
Yes, sir. It's always easy to have a one and done, for sure. It negates me having to track it.
I'm just making a note. That might have been my biggest question. There will be some existing streets that will survive. Like Sumner Road will survive all of this. And Eaton will survive, most of Eaton will survive this?
Correct. I think there's just a slight adjustment to Eaton. And then there's just a small portion of First Sterling that's being closed, but most of that's going to remain open also.
Can you say a bit more about that, or is that really a question I should have asked the developer? For the public, will they still be able to travel on Firth Sterling as they do now?
I believe on most of it, the part of it that's being closed, I think it'll then convert to something similar to an alley. And the applicant may have to actually weigh in on that for what their, the proposed development plan, because I don't know that you could take a vehicle in the future after closing that portion of First Sterling and then, operate as like a through street.
All right, I may, when we're done with the executive testimony, ask Mr. Freeman to come back on that. The plan is to have a brand new Obama Way and a brand new Riverwalk. Does that sound right? It looks like also a brand new Hermitage Way.
Correct.
So adjustments to Eaton in those brand new streets and a little bit of change to Firth Sterling, and then a bunch of existing alleys that go out of existence.
Correct.
Give me a second.
Yeah, and just to note on the dedication exhibit plat, there's a new alley system proposed. So there's going to be a bunch that are closed, but then there's going to be a whole new alley system. Some of it dovetailing into existing alley structures, and then other ones where it's just new alleys.
Yeah, I guess I see that on the dedication plats. I don't think I have any other questions at this point for you on Berry Farm. So why don't I let you continue? You were going to talk about Bill 167.
Correct. And this is
Go through the next couple and then I'll ask more questions.
okay. Excellent. Yeah. And this one, I made a note. We'll talk about the W Street, Howard Street thing, but I'll read through my testimony and then circle back on that one question. B 24167, dedication of land for street purposes and establishment of a building restriction line in square 2873, SO 20-04746, Act of 2021, which was introduced by Chairman Mendelson at the request of the mayor. Purpose of this bill is to dedicate lots 1107 and 1113 in square 2873 to accommodate the extension of W Street and to establish a 25-foot building restriction line on the southern portion of lots 1106 and 1112 in square 2873 in Ward 1. The record lots were recorded in the Office of the Surveyor on August 14, 2019 in Subdivision Book 216 on page 13 for lots 1106 and 1107, and on November 27, 2019 in Subdivision Book 216 on page 118 for lots 1112 and 1113. The title to lots 1106 and 1107 in square 2873 has been determined to be held with the Howard University, It's Mine Now, LLC, and 50 Turkeys, LLC. Title to lots 1112 and 1113 in square 2873 has been determined to be held with the Howard University and Howard Dormitory Holdings, LLC. The most probable estimate of value as of January 1, 2021, which represents tax year 2021, for the land dedication for public street and building restriction line in square 2873 is $3,746,710. The applicant for this dedication building restriction line establishment is Howard University, who is represented by Saul Ewing Arenstein and Lear LLP. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies and utility companies for this application on July 27, 2020. Ddot objected to this application until the conditions have been satisfied as outlined in their letter dated November 17, 2020. In a letter dated January 6, 2021, Howard University agreed to all conditions stated by Ddot in their letter dated November 17, 2020. The remaining executive agencies have no objection. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-02.023, Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission of this application on July 27, 2020, in a letter dated August 26, 2020. NCPC staff determined that the proposed project falls under an exception listed in Chapter 8 for NCPC's submission guidelines. Specifically, NCPC concluded that the project meets the requirements of Exception 8, which includes street and alley closing located outside of the boundary of the L'Enfant plan of this federal city under the following conditions. 1, the street or alley is not adjacent to federal property, and 2, the street or alley does not provide access to a federal property or affect other federal interests. The project was also made available for public review on the NCPC website, and no comments were received. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-02.025, Advisory Neighborhood Commission ANC 1B was notified of this application on July 27, 2020. In a letter dated September 3, 2020, ANC 1B indicated they support the proposed street dedication and establishment of a building restriction line in square 2873. The applicant is the owner of the property of the street dedication and building restriction line to be established. That's it for that one. And I think on a sketch, we had received something that colloquially named the extension of W Street as Howard Street. That probably should be amended on the plat to just say W Street, because it will be committed as an extension of W Street. And I'm a little unclear whether, when we record this plat, and maybe this is even a question to you, will it be officially named W Street at that time? Because I can add that language on the plat when we record it as a dedication and naming at the same time. I'm just not sure if that's two actions or if it can all be done at once. That's all I have for this one.
Yeah, I believe it can all be done at once, and that's something I need to be mindful of. Say again how it came up, Howard Street or Way or whatever, how that came to you?
I think initially when we received a sketch, it just said Howard Street on it, so we just added that to the title. So I mean, and since that time, we now know that it's W Street, but I just, I should have amended it on the plat before we sent it over. So my apologies.
Why on the plat does it show an easement for a cul-de-sac? Because that's not relevant to this.
I'm pulling up the plat now to have a look at it. I believe that's already in existence, and I may actually need to have the applicant. I think we were just shown that as part of this project site. I mean, it can easily be removed if that makes if that's something you would like us to do. But since the extension of W Street is kind of connecting with 9th Street, 9th Street is terminating. We just recorded these couple of easements just north of this site, and it's going to be, part of the local scheme. It actually kind of helps people in the future, like if they're researching these sites or this plat, to just have that information made available to them, because some of these easements, even though we recorded these in like a in like a book and page, in a subdivision book and page, they can be a little tough to find in the future because the easements themselves don't necessarily have a lot in squares. So, going in Surdocs and doing like a search for some of these documents, it can be a little labor intensive and even sometimes, missed. So because it was so close by, we just put it on there. But if you'd prefer not to have those on there, it's no problem to remove them.
Yeah, I'm not making that request. So I just was asking, in the alley, which, and the plat I have is in red, that's an existing alley.
Correct.
The building restriction line is only on I'm assuming the north side of the new W Street.
That's correct.
Is there a reason for that?
Well, it was at so I might have to actually ask the applicant to weigh in on that. So it actually doesn't fully meet the right-of-way width for a minor street. If you take the width of what's being dedicated and that restriction, but I do believe an agreement was reached with the applicant and I don't know if it was Ddot or DHCD or whomever related to that. And this was the accepted final result. And I know, I guess typically we're used to seeing like a right of way, and then if it needed building restriction lines, they're equally apportioned on both sides. This was the approved configuration that was that we were asked to draft a plat on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's your understanding that it does meet with the building restriction line, it meets the required width for a minor street.
It actually doesn't, but they're
Even
some-
with the building restriction line? I thought you said
That is
it's
correct. No, it does not. It's an issue I raised right away, but somehow there was and the applicant may need to weigh in on this about how they obtained approval for the current configuration under review by you.
Okay. So I will have a question or two for Mr. Nice Williams. Why don't you continue? Please.
Okay. Next is B 24-211, closing of a portion of Maryland Avenue Southwest between Independence Avenue and 6th Street Southwest, and the transfer of jurisdiction of the closed portion of Maryland Avenue and portions of Independence Avenue, 4th and 6th Street Southwest, SO 17-26507, Act of 2021, which was introduced by Chairman Mendelson at the request of the mayor. The purpose of this bill is to close a portion of Maryland Avenue Southwest and to transfer jurisdiction of portions of Maryland Avenue, Independence Avenue, 4th and 6th Street Southwest, adjacent to Square 492 and Ward 6 to the National Park Service. This relates to the new Dwight D. Eisenhower Memorial. The portion of Maryland Avenue Southwest to be closed was created by the establishment of the federal city of Washington. The street is shown on the King Platts Plate 9 in the year 1803. Title of the portion of Maryland Avenue to be closed is determined to be held by the United States. The most probable estimate of value as of January 1, 2020, which represents tax year 2021 for the public street closed in Square 492 and north of 492 is $63,073,900. The applicant for this application is the U.S. Department of the Interior National Park Service. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relative executive branch agencies and utility companies on January 29, 2018. They have no objections. Pursuant to the DC Official Code 9-202.023, Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission of this application on January 29, 2018. In a letter dated April 11, 2018, NCPC stated, pursuant to the delegation of authority adopted by the commission on December 14, 1977. The chairman approved the revised transfer of jurisdiction of a portion of Maryland Avenue between 4th and 6th Street Southwest and portions of sidewalk space along 4th and 6th and Independence Avenue Southwest from the District Department of Transportation to United States government under the jurisdiction of the National Park Service and General Services Administration in order to create a unified site for the Dwight D. Eisenhower Memorial. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.025, Advisory Neighborhood Commission, ANC 6D, was notified of this application on January 29, 2018, in a letter dated April 10, 2018. ANC 6D indicated their support for this application.
Just out of curiosity, with the closing, do you have to redraw the lots or squares?
No, they exist. So Maryland Avenue, it exists right now as far as like on paper, and we don't have to redo anything with the individual squares. They exist beside it just the way they are. There's no
The land will revert to the abutting squares. I guess it looks like on the north, it's Reservation 5, and on the south, it's Square 492.
So what ends up happening is when I record the plat, I send a copy of it over to the tax office and they just create a big tax lot for the entire entity. And then it lives on as a tax lot under the jurisdiction of National Park Service. We won't do a record lot for it.
Okay. Why don't you continue? This is exciting stuff.
Okay.
Enjoy it.
The next bill, B 24-234, abandonment of the highway plan for Jackson Street Northeast, SO 21-00463, Act of 2021, which was introduced by Councilmember McDuffie. Purpose of this bill is to remove from the highway plan the extension of Jackson Street Northeast located within lot 806 in square 2830. I think that should be
Square 3835.
Yep, 3835 in Ward 5. The applicant for this application is PO 8th Street LP, who is represented by Holland and Knight LLC. The Office of the Surveyor notified Ddot on December 9th, 2020, in a letter dated February 3rd, 2021. Ddot indicated they had no objections to the elimination of the segment of Jackson Street from the DC Highway Plan. Pursuant to DC Code 9-202.023, the Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission of this application on December 9, 2020. In a letter dated December 29, 2020, NCPC indicated that the staff determined that the proposed project falls under an exception listed in Chapter 8 of NCPC submission guidelines. Particularly, NCPC determined that the project meets the requirements of Exception 9, which includes the amendments to the highway plan that do not have a negative impact on federal property and cause no environmental impacts, including adverse effects on historic properties. Staff review did not identify any federal interests that would be impacted by the proposed modification. Pursuant to DC Code 9-202.025, Advisory Neighborhood Commission ANC 5E was notified of this application on December 9, 2020. In a letter dated December 15, 2020, ANC 5E indicated that they have no objection to the proposed modification.
I don't think I had any questions on this one.
Okay.
Let me just double check. This is the one that I incorrectly called a paper street because it doesn't even, it's not even dedicated.
That's correct. It is not a paper street. It's indicated on the highway plan, which is kind of that big master plan of possible future alignments.
Okay. So why don't you proceed to the next one?
Okay. Finally, this is the last one. 24-291 Omnibus Progressive National Baptist Convention Redevelopment Act of 2021, which was introduced by Councilmember Gray. The portion of 50th Street Northeast to be closed was created by a subdivision of the towns of Lincoln, as shown on book Governor Shepherd on page 25, recorded in the year 1874. Title to the closed portion of 50th Street Northeast could not be determined to be held by the District of Columbia or the United States. The purpose of this bill is to remove from the highway plan extension of portion of 50th Street Northeast located within lot 827, 828, 829, and 830 in square 5194, to order the closing of a portion of 50th Street Northeast adjacent to square 5194, and to accept the dedication of lots 828 and 830 in square 5194 in Ward 7 for public street purposes. The most probable estimate of value as of January 1, 2021, which represents tax year, I think that should say 2021, for the portion of the street to be closed in square 5194 is $17,910. The applicant for this application is the Progressive National Baptist Convention, LLC, who is represented by Holland and Knight, LLC. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies on June 1, 2021. Ddot objected to this application until conditions have been satisfied as outlined in their letter dated June 29, 2021. It now appears that their concerns have been resolved. In a letter dated June 8, 2021, Verizon objects to this proposal unless conditions outlined in their letter are met. The remaining utility companies have no objections. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.023, the Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission of this application on June 1, 2021. In a letter dated June 1, 2021, NCPC staff determined that the proposed project falls under two exceptions listed in Chapter 8 of the NCPC submission guidelines. Particularly, NCPC concluded that this project meets the requirements of exception H8, which pertains to District of Columbia Zoning Commission referrals related to street closures outside of the LaFont city boundary under the following conditions. One, the street or alley is not adjacent to federal property, and two, the street or alley does not provide access to a federal property or affect other federal interests. Additionally, the project also meets the requirements of Section 9, which relates to highway plan amendments that do not have a negative impact on federal property and causes no environmental impacts, including adverse effect on historic properties. Staff has determined that each of these conditions apply to the proposed district referral, and therefore that this project is exempt from commission review. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.025, Advisory Neighborhood Commission ANC 7 was notified of this application on June 1, 2021. To date, we have not received comments from ANC 7C. I'd like to pause right there and let you know that Ms. Batiste, during her testimony, suggested that they do now have approval from ANC 7C. This concludes my testimony. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today and welcome any questions you may have regarding any of these matters. Thank you.
Give me just a second. Thank you. I'm a little bit confused by this one. Let me start with the less important question, and that is, there's some strange lines on this plat. Just above between the lettering square 5194 and square 5194, I guess lot 829 and 827, is a very irregularly shaped line. Is that really the lot line?
Yeah, it's an old parcel line. And I believe historically there might have been an old rail line offshoot. It probably went to some depot up northeast of old Nanny Helen Burroughs Avenue many years ago, but it still exists like that. You're talking about, it almost looks like a slip lane for an intersection or something.
No. It's
Okay.
a very weird looking, it's a horizontal line. I don't know if you can see. Where am I? This thing.
Oh, okay. We're down at the bottom. I thought we were talking about something up near the title. Okay. So on here, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I mean, is that a lot line?
So the above 5194, the kind of squirrely looking line, is actually the property line between lot 827 and 829. Below that, there's two actual lines from the DC highway plan that are obviously part of this removal. And so you have like a heavier dash line and then a really tightly dashed line. So those are two lines that are on the highway plan. But the oddly shaped line is actually a division between the two tax lots.
Okay, and you don't know the explanation for the irregular shape?
Maybe the applicant could weigh in on that, but I would likely say that it follows existing features or proposed features on their development plan.
And then where were you referring to when you said possibly an old railroad line?
Oh, I thought you were talking about parcel 187 at 12.
Yes.
It's running northeasterly.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that I don't think it exists anymore, but I think it was an old rail line.
And that's why it's still denoted as a parcel.
Yeah, it just hasn't been, it hasn't been brought, like purchased by somebody or what have you and brought into another lot configuration. It still exists like that.
Okay, and your testimony was that there is still one objection in the record besides Ddot, and that is Verizon. You said that in your statement.
I'm going back and looking at it right now. Yeah, now I'm gonna have to dig this up to find out what exactly they're stating in their letter that their objection is.
Well, that's okay. I'm going to ask Mr. Batiste to come back and just speak to it.
Okay.
I did have another not important question. You said that when this land was originally subdivided, it was a subdivision of the town of Lincoln? What is
Correct.
What is reference to?
It on the in the subdivision book. So, I mean, there was a time before when the city of Washington has always been the city of Washington, the federal city, according to the L'Enfant plan. But at that time, there was also Georgetown, which is like had its own records, and the county of Washington had its own records, and they would record things in their own towns. And so it's a historical designation, town of Lincoln.
So within the county was the town of Lincoln in this area of Northeast Washington.
That's correct. Let me see if I could pull that plat up real quick.
Let me see if I have any other questions.
And if, just as a note, if you ever have any interest in these, in me forwarding the plats of origin for any of these, I mean, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Give me a moment. I think my other question has to do with language in the bills introduced. So as I look at your plat is, north is to the left.
Correct.
So it would be correct to say that 50th Street, the portion of 50th Street at issue is south of Nanny Helen Burroughs.
Correct. On the east line of 50th Street.
And the legislation includes naming the portion of land being dedicated as 50th Street, but that would be consistent with the existing name.
Correct.
Okay, let me see if I have any other questions. Hold on.
Okay. Also, I just sent Mr. Stum a copy of that Town of Lincoln plat.
Mr. Stum is reminding me, I already talked with you, Mr. Snyder, about the phasing, and it's easier for you if it's just done once. But you do have prepared different plats for the phasing if we go that route.
Yes.
And then I asked you about the name of W and Howard, and you spoke to that, and you seemed to think that W was the more appropriate name.
Correct.
Because it's an extension of W.
Yep.
I don't think I have any other questions for you at this point, but don't go away. So we're going to hear from Mr. Emmerine, and then I'm going to have a few questions, like maybe one question each for Mr. Freeman, Belford Sterling, and Mr. Niece Williams about the building restriction line and ownership of the lots, and then a question for Ms. Batiste regarding the ANC support. Mr. Emmerine, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today. I should note that I'm filling in for Anna Chamberlain, our Associate Director for Planning and Sustainability. She had some unexpected internet access issues, so I'm pinch hitting. I'm here today to present testimony regarding 6 bills. I won't read the whole list. You have the list in front of you. I'll just go straight to the first 2, 24-104 and 105. The stated purpose of Bill 24-104 is to close portions of the public street and alley system adjacent to squares 5862, 5865, 5866, and 5867, as shown by the hash marks on the surveyor's plat in SO 17-26688. Ddot filed a report with the Office of the Surveyor on August 8th, 2019, related to this SO. Ddot's report noted that the agency objected to the proposed closure and removal of building restriction lines until several conditions are met. Since the conditions are lengthy, I won't read them in full, but I've attached our report for the record. Once these conditions have been met, Ddot would have no objection to the recordation of the plat. The stated purpose of Bill 24-105 is to dedicate the streets and alleys adjacent to squares 5862, 5865, 5866, 5867 as Obama Way Southeast, Eureka Place Southeast, Solomon Road Southeast, Eaton Road Southeast, Riverwalk Southeast, Stephen Road Southeast, and Hermitage Way Southeast, as shown on the surveyor's plats filed under SO 17-26689. Again, Ddot filed a report with the Office of the Surveyor on August 8th, 2019, related to this SO. Ddot's report noted that the agency objected to the proposed closure and removal of building restriction lines and dedication until several conditions are met. Once the conditions have been met, Ddot would have no objection to the recordation of the plat. The stated purpose of Bill 24-167 is to dedicate lots 1107 at 1113 in Square 2873 for street purposes to accommodate the extension of, in my prepared remarks, I have W Street Northwest, and establish a 25-foot wide building restriction line on lots 1106 and 1112 in Square 2873 in Northwest Washington. Ddot filed a report with the Office of the Surveyor on November 17th, 2020, related to SO 20-04746. Ddot's report noted that the agency objected to the proposed dedication until several conditions are met. The first condition is that the applicant has constructed the public space improvements pursuant to the terms and conditions of the horizontal public use agreement signed by the parties. My understanding is the applicant just recently began construction, so no conditions have yet been satisfied related to this. The next condition will be that the public space improvements have been inspected by Ddot and meet or exceed Ddot standards and specifications consistent with the horizontal public use agreement, and that the dedication plat for W Street Northwest shall not be recorded until Ddot has agreed to accept the public space improvements. All statutory warranties have been provided, and the applicant has complied with all of the terms and conditions of the horizontal public use agreement. The applicant has been working with Ddot through the terms of the horizontal public use agreement. Once these conditions have been met, Ddot would have no objection to the recordation of the plat. The stated purpose of Bill 24-211 is to order the closing of a portion of Maryland Avenue Southwest and the transfer of jurisdiction of the closed portion of Maryland Avenue and portions of Independence Avenue and 4th and 6th Street Southwest to the National Park Service. Ddot initially objected to this closure until an agreement could be provided, evidencing that DC Water will continue to maintain the stormwater facilities on, under, and through the sidewalks around the site. The National Park Service has since provided a letter committing to issue the necessary access permits once the transfer is complete. Accordingly, Ddot now has no objections to the proposed closures in this bill. The stated purpose of Bill 24-234 is to remove from the plan for the extension of a permanent system of highways, a portion of Jackson Street Northeast located within Lot 805, Square 3835. Ddot has no objections to the proposed closures in this bill. The stated purpose of Bill 24-291 is to remove from the plan for extension of a permanent system of highways a portion of 50th Street Northeast, located within Lot 825 in Square 5194. My prepared remarks say that it calls for the closing of 50th Street Northeast and Nannie Helen Burroughs Avenue Northeast, adjacent to Square 5194, Per the earlier conversation, I believe that should be a reference to removal of that portion of Nanny Helen Burrows from the highway plan, not a closure. And accepts the dedication of lots 828 and 830 in square 5194 for public street purposes. Ddot filed a report with the Office of the Surveyor on June 29th, 2021, related to SO 21-02992. The first condition is that the applicant records at the Recorder of Deeds a Ddot approved public access easement for the portion of the property to be improved by a 6-foot sidewalk and retaining wall, which will be maintained by the property owner. The applicant has not returned the sign easement at this time, so this condition has not yet been satisfied. I understand that the applicant has been working with Ddot on the easement, and we are waiting for final signature. Once these conditions have been met, Ddot would have no objection to the recordation of this plat. This concludes my testimony. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify, and I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Amrine. So I do have some questions, but let me I guess begin with the W Street, which is Bill 24-167. What I understood from Mr. Snyder is that the to be dedicated W Street will not be the minimum width for a minor street, including the building restriction line. Can you speak to that?
Only briefly. I apologize. I'm not familiar with the all of the details of this proposed development, but my understanding is that the development plan proposed by the applicant simply wouldn't work unless it's configured with this narrower width. And Ddot had no objection to this street width. It seemed like a relative non-issue for us.
Well, how much? What is the typically required street width for a minor street?
I don't have that at my fingertips, but if you give me a moment, I can look that up.
Or if you want, you could simply follow up the hearing with something in writing that explains what the minimum standard is and why Ddot agreed to deviate from that, and also include why the building restriction line would only be on the north side instead of on both sides. And to me, that's a mathematical issue, as in the paved street or the dedicated street plus the, and I realize dedicated and paved can be different, but the width of the street plus the building restriction line equals a total, and that total could be with the building restriction line on both sides of a smaller width. So I just don't know, and if Ddot addressed that, I would appreciate it.
Certainly. I will just note for the record that a minor street may be as narrow as 75 feet. That the public right-of-way may be established at 55 feet with building restriction lines set back 10 feet. And I think the DC code does say on both sides.
Okay, and I think the print's a little bit too small here. I can't tell if it's 50 plus 25 or 55 plus 25. Mr. Snyder, can you read your own writing?
Yeah, it says 55 on a slant, and I think it might either be only 50 feet wide or slightly larger. So I did go back through the code, and I'm trying to pull it up again right now while we're on this meeting, but I don't have it in front of me as far as, but it just was something that came to my attention right when I was looking at the plats to make sure that it qualified, and it was an issue. And then I was told by the applicant that, you know, that it was the current configuration up for your review is approved.
Yeah, well, and Ddot's indicated in their testimony that they're okay with this.
Yeah.
But I would like an explanation for the deviation in the width, as well as why the building restriction line is only on one side.
Be happy to follow up with that.
Thank you. Now for that same street segment of W Street, there's a development that's, I guess, underway or about to begin on that square. I think that's what I heard Mr. Nice Williams say. What Ddot is requiring is that there is an agreement with, I'm not sure if it's with Howard or the developer, and that's not my question, that the street has to be built to standards acceptable to Ddot. And you have an agreement in writing to that effect.
That's, yes, that's correct.
And so because of that agreement, you have no objection.
See, I think, let me check on that. I think that, so I think in this case, we have the, there is a horizontal public use agreement. And my understanding is that that agreement has not yet been concluded. But once that is concluded and both parties have agreed to all of the terms, then that would remove any objections that we have, provided that we could accept public space improvements pursuant to that agreement.
Okay, I have to go back and look at what we did last fall because I'm looking at your statement, or Ms. Chamberlain's statement, that the plat shall not be recorded until Ddot has agreed to accept the public space improvements. Isn't there some other way that you can enforce the agreement that the street be built according to your standards?
Are you asking if there's a way we can enforce that once the street has been dedicated? After the dedication?
Yeah.
So my understanding is that once the streets have been dedicated, they become the property of the District of Columbia. And I'm not aware that there's a mechanism to hand them back to the developer if they build infrastructure that for some reason does not meet our standards.
Contract, an agreement that the developer agrees that they will build according to standards or they'll be subject to some penalties, and you can enforce that contract.
I'm not aware that we've entered into contract previously.
Well, this is something we're going to look at. Because I think that this is also the issue with Berry Farms. That you're requiring this phasing. Oh, I'm kind of confused. You're requiring this phasing to that they can't, the whole thing can't be recorded until you are accepting each piece in turn. We're probably going to follow up with Ddot on that. Give me just a moment. Mr. Emmerine, I don't think I have any other questions for you, but understand that I'm not comfortable with this, the way these conditions are being imposed, and I'm hesitating in how I'm saying it because I'm not completely clear here. I think it's clearer to me with Berry Farms because that's just that's a very long, complicated process that we're embarking on. And ordinarily what we do is we approve the closing subject to certain conditions being met. And actually, I'm not so sure that what we're talking about with the W Street is that different than what we typically do, that the council authorizes the closing, orders the filing of the plat subject to the following conditions, that W Street be built to standards acceptable to, but Berry Farms gets more complicated. And so I'm probably gonna get back to you on that. So there's one thing you will get back to us on, and that is the width and the building restriction line on that W Street.
Yes.
Okay, I have a couple questions for the applicants, so I'm going to turn to them. Mr. Freeman, are you here?
I think I am. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Is there anything I need to do to turn my camera on? I just accepted the invitation.
What I'm being told is that you can talk, but we're having some difficulty fully promoting you to panelist. So I'm okay if you just answer my question. I'm really just focused on Firth Sterling. What's going on there?
Okay, I think I've just been promoted to panelist.
Yes, you've been fully promoted. You don't get a pay raise for it, you just get promoted.
That's how a lot of promotions in life work, so.
With regard to Firth Sterling, can you explain what's going on there?
So I want to make sure, and in this virtual space, it's a little difficult, but Chairman, do you have a physical copy of our submission, or do you have an electronic copy?
I have a paper copy.
So if you look at Firth Sterling, the southernmost portion, the plat that should show phase 2, public streets, public alleys closed and building restriction lines removed, phase 2.
Hold on. Well, I have a consolidated plat that shows everything.
So I think what's been a little challenging here is that there have been a variety of changes as this process has moved forward. So it looks like you're now seeing my screen. Thank you, Mr. Stubb. What has happened and this drawing reflects the current proposal. It's subsequent to us originally filing this application. A landmark application was filed with HPRB. HPRB landmarked 5, 6 existing structures kind of in the bottom left-hand corner of the site. As a result, that's the left. Right. So as a result of that landmark application, we are no longer proposing to close that portion of First Sterling. That portion of First Sterling remains open, and what it does is it dead ends. So that is remaining exactly as is, and the plats now, this plat correctly reflects what should be happening on that portion of First Sterling, i.e. that it's staying exactly as is.
Okay, but how about, it looks like something's happening to the northeast of that on First Sterling.
So that you're looking at the plat that is labeled. It gets narrower at that portion. That's the issue.
Phase 1A.
Phase 1A, public streets, public alleys closed, and building restriction line removed. It is getting slightly narrower at that portion. I think it ultimately dead ends. It's not a full street, if you will. It's more like a travel lane there.
All right, I'm not hearing you clearly, and I'm not understanding. It looks like 2/3 of it is being closed.
It narrows there, and if you continue, it actually dead ends. So it's not a normal quote unquote street that provides full access. It dead ends at that portion of First Sterling.
To the right of what we see, it dead ends?
Yes.
So then, maybe that's the existing, although that's not how I remember it. That First Sterling is just a street segment from the, I want to be correct here. That's northeast from the southwest end, which was the first plat we looked at, to the northeast end. It's just a segment. It doesn't connect. It doesn't continue in either direction. That's what I'm hearing you say?
So to the left, if you will, there's a median, and this portion to the right is I don't know what you call it, like a service lane, if you will. But to the left, if you imagine, there's a median in the fuller portion. Is there. I'm sorry, I've got a bunch of things ringing in the background. But to the where it says First Sterling, right above that, it completely dead ends. I'm happy to submit what I think would be helpful is an aerial image. I'm happy to submit that for the record, just to make it fully clear what the actual existing street conditions are.
All right, that would be helpful. But then, so what's happening here and what we're seeing here is a narrowing of it.
Yes.
And why is it being narrowed? Are you building on it?
So that lot will ultimately get bigger to accommodate a proposed building.
Will this still be open space that to be traveled, but it's now part of the lot?
The portion that remains open, you can still travel in that area. Yes, sir. We're not closing the entirety of First Sterling.
Yeah, but that wasn't my question. The portion that's being closed, will that continue to be open and can be traveled on, even though it's now part of the lot? I guess the closing is to get you the density for the building.
I need a double check on the site plan. I do believe we have building going in. I don't know if it's all, but definitely some of that closed area.
Maybe you could follow up with more detail on that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I did have two other points. I think, Mr. Stum, if you could pull that that file back up.
What is it that you want him to pull up?
That the exhibit packet that was just up.
Yeah, I'm hearing him say they're 250 pages. So
I want to get to page 31 of that. It's the Ddot report.
the Ddot report.
I think page 7 of the Ddot report. Great, right there. So I think I heard it stated that there was a Ddot objection in the file, but I was not aware of that, because when you actually read the Ddot report, what it says here is Ddot has no objection to the closure and dedication, but expects all of the terms and conditions contained in the agreement. And that's an agreement that the developer signed with Ddot related to the construction of the streets and alleys. Including but not limited to the following. And obviously we've agreed to the conditions that are part of the agreement. So I did want to clarify, the Ddot report does not state an objection. I think it was stated twice that there's a Ddot objection. There's no outstanding Ddot objection in this record.
Okay, who said there was? Was that Mr. Snyder or Mr.?
I think I heard the surveyor and the Ddot representative say that Ddot objected subject to conditions. Again, I don't want to speak for them, but I wanted to clarify that there was no Ddot objection in this case.
Okay, well, the way we're going to look at this is, as we draft the language, we're going to pay attention to whether there are conditions that we have to require. And that's kind of sort of what I'm trying to straighten out here. In any event, I just had that those questions for you about First Sterling, but you'll follow up with some additional, the aerial and.
Yeah, I'll get an aerial plan and a site plan showing what happens in that an aerial plan better describing the existing conditions, and a site plan showing what happens in that portion of First Sterling to be closed.
Yes. All right, thank you. Let me turn
Thank you.
to Anise Williams. So
Yep, I'm here.
what prompted me to ask you back was in the surveyor's testimony. I have to get the plat, just a second. As I understand it, the new W Street will be what is currently lot 1107 and lot 1113. And the surveyor's testimony, lot 1106 and 1107 have been determined to be held by the Howard University, It's Mine Now LLC, and 50 Turkeys LLC. Is Howard behind It's Mine Now LLC and 50 Turkeys?
So I can clarify that. The parcel to the south of the parcel 1107 is subject to a meaningful connection with the 930 Club, which I believe is owned in some way, shape, or form by a combination of the other two referenced entities that you mentioned. And so that, I believe, may have been some sort of a vestige from the subdivision process that occurred to actually memorialize and create separate lots for the dedicated parcels. But
Okay,
the
so-
university is the ultimate owner and fee simple of the parcels and has site control.
So lot 1107 is owned by Howard University
Correct.
and not anyone else.
Correct. Separate from the meaningful connection note that I just made.
And lot 1113, which is the other part of W Street, is owned by Howard University.
It is owned by Howard University's special purpose entity that is wholly owned by Howard University. The name of the entity is Howard University Dormitory Holdings 1, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. So again, these two lots, which are what will become W Street, are solely owned by or controlled by, I'll say solely owned by Howard University or by an entity that is solely controlled or controlled solely by Howard University.
Yes, sir.
Can you speak to why the building restriction line is only on one side? The north side?
Absolutely. There were actually a number of very esoteric reasons why. But as was cited, the minimum width is 55-foot cartway, and the contemplated building restriction line is typically aggregated on either side of the street, 10 feet each, to create a total of 20 feet. And then that meets the minimum 75-foot requirement in aggregate, right? So there are actually some conditional, like sort of site context reasons that are driving this, as well as some planning reasons that are driving that. And primarily, if you were able to see the subject parcels and their environs, to the east of this, and again, this sort of plays into the broader dialogue about creating a W Street that actually connects all the way from Georgia Avenue to Florida Avenue. There is a historic building, which is on the National Register, that actually creates somewhat of a deflection in the natural pathway of W Street. And as you might notice, this particular dedication, those parcels are angled to be able to connect with W Street as it picks up on the other side of Florida Avenue. So there were some turning angle situations that were analyzed and ultimately determined that it would be a better situation for the safety of pedestrians and others, particularly pedestrians, because this is something that is intended for pedestrian connectivity and multimodal connectivity. The decision was made to aggregate that 20 feet and in fact add an additional 5 feet to create an aggregate of 80 feet overall on the north side of this particular parcel. And that also, as I mentioned, planning wise, was able to accomplish the creation of a small urban space, quote unquote, which is something that was called for in this specific area in the Duke plan, the Howard Town Center area. So we were able to accomplish a planning goal. And after conferring with OP and various other parties on this, the Department of Transportation did agree to that. And also just want to point out that there actually is, to your maybe subsequent question, an agreement that is titled, excuse me, let me pull up the title here. An agreement governing the acceptance and dedication of street improvements for W Street Northwest between 9th Street and 8th Street Northwest. And it was executed and effective on July 9th of 2020. And it was executed by the developer, the university's Dormitory Holdings 1, which is our special purpose entity, as well as the District of Columbia acting through the District Department of Transportation. So that actually does lay out the fact that, in its title and preamble, actually, that we're creating a 55-foot cartway with an aggregate 25-foot building restriction line on the north side to create an 80-foot wide W Street extension between 8th and 9th Streets. And that agreement goes on to dictate very explicitly all of the various requirements, milestones, submission deadlines, et cetera, for all of the various points of coordination from design all the way through to delivery with the Department of Transportation and all the parties that are involved.
Is there any penalty if Howard doesn't comply with it or if the developer doesn't comply with it?
I can comb through that. I'm certain there's something in there to that effect, but I can't confirm that at this particular moment.
Sure. Could you send us a copy of that agreement?
Certainly.
Okay, if you would please, to Mr. Stone. So there is a structure to the south of lot 1113.
It's to the east of 1113. And, if you go all the way to Georgia Avenue, W Street, the city grid, because this falls immediately outside of L'Enfant's original plan, it actually cranks somewhat. If Georgia Avenue has that deflection, and the city grid actually cranks at an angle at that particular, as it crosses Georgia Avenue. And so the old Bond Bread Bakery building in particular, which is on the north side of the adjacent lot, that building, correct, on Georgia, which spans Georgia Avenue to the west to 8th Street. That particular building is actually in the way of the natural trajectory that W Street would most safely cross Georgia Avenue and then traverse along its path westward. So as this particular segment of Georgia, W in question today, as it intersects 8th Street, it has to push to the north pretty substantially in order to be able to pick up the trajectory of the street.
Sure, but that doesn't speak to the building restriction line not being on the south. And the south is because there's a building at in lot 1114, I believe.
Well, lot 1114, if you'll note, it's a sort of oddly shaped parcel. It's very small in size. And I believe that the clear width on the east side of that was maybe 12 and a half, 13 feet. But if you see, that actually falls to the south of the building, the historic building that is on the east side of 8th Street.
Yes.
And so if you were to connect W Street, respecting the historic edifice, the center line of W Street as it intersects with 8th Street would have been further north than, optimal for a sort of a cartway. So again, I think that the brass, not to say brass tacks, but the ultimate resolution of this was an agreement, between Ddot and the university and all the other parties that the aggregation of the building restriction line on one side of the street was, acceptable to all parties and actually accomplished a number of goals. I only highlighted just the two major ones.
Okay, so you'll
Mr.
provide
Chairman,
agreement. Yes, Mr. Emrine.
if I can break in, I just want to confirm that there is in fact an agreement executed. My apologies for my earlier misstatement. I had misread the information. I think it's more accurate to say that we're working with the developer to make sure that all the terms of the agreement are being met. So I apologize for the error.
It's okay. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Neese-Williams. My last question is to Ms. Baptiste. And I think that's simply to ask if you could provide us with a copy of the ANC's support. So if I remember correctly, Mr. Snyder initially testified that he was unaware of the ANC being in support, but he had heard you say that they were in support. And I think in your statement, you say 7C adopted a resolution of support in June, but I don't think we have it.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the ANC 7C voted in support of the application on June 10th. And I wrote a letter kind of acknowledging that, as well as all of our community outreach, which is submitted into the record as Exhibit P. Unfortunately, despite several requests, we have drafted the letter of support, but we have not received a formal letter of support from ANC 7C. I was there, I watched them vote, but they've not provided us with the letter for the record.
Okay, well, if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. So I need to come back to produce something you don't have. Sorry about that. Okay, but at any rate, that clarifies that. I don't think I have any other questions. Let me just check with your staff.
Yeah.
I don't have any other questions. I want to thank all the witnesses.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Verizon removed its objection from this application, and that is reflected in Exhibit O of the record by letter dated September 13th, since that was not clear from the Office of the Surveyor.
Yes, and actually, I meant to ask you about that. Sorry.
That's okay.
I do see that we have that. Thank you for clarifying that. All right, that I don't have any other questions for any of you. Thank you for your time, your testimony. There's some follow-up, and if we have questions, we'll reach out to you. So thank you. That's going to conclude this hearing. This has been a hearing on
Stop at
bills related to closing of public streets and alleys, dedication of public streets and alleys, and related actions. The record in this matter is open for 2 weeks. That is, it will close at 5 p.m. on Thursday, October 28th, 2021. Time is 12:58 in the afternoon, and this hearing is adjourned.